You would not believe the amount of companies and one-man bands that I speak to who don't have a contract.
Struggling with credit control, doesn't like having the conversations. He's got debts that are building up.
We tend not to go down the winding up route because if you're winding up a company, you're not going to get your money.
I am joined by Karina, and she is going to be here to explain who she is, what she's done in the past. She's going to give you some free advice on what might be able to help you. And you know what? If you need her services, she might even give you her phone number at the end and you can give her a call. So welcome to the Director First podcast, Karina Senior. Thank you for joining us today. And listen, tell us in short form, we don't need to know about swimming badges or anything like that, but how did you get to where you're at now? How did you come into our paths?
Okay, so thanks for having me. So I have been in credit management now for just over 15 years. Worked in many different industries. Yeah, I absolutely love all things credit control and helping businesses succeed. Like you say, many businesses, it's not the fact that they are bad at business or the services is poor or the products are it's that they don't like getting the money in. They find it daunting and having that conversation. And that's where credit control comes in, effective credit control. And it's all about minimizing your risk and working as a team between both debtor and the client.
And tell us a little bit about your experience, because like you say, you've been doing this for many, many years. What type of roles have you performed in the industry?
Type of roles, as in credit control, consultant,
Sorry,
negotiator.
a little bit of the story about what you've done in the past.
So I have helped companies with a full restructure. So we've gone in, realised that the way that they were working wasn't effective, and they were actually they'd opened themselves up to a whole host of risk that they didn't realise. So we had to go right back to basics, look at the terms and conditions, the contracts. They just left themselves open. So we do a lot of support work rather than just getting on the phones and getting the cash in. It goes right to the very start with some companies, where it's looking at those processes to make sure that things, when we go, things are still ticking over, and should there be an issue in the future, they've got all the documentation and everything there needed, really.
I mean, that's a great place to start, isn't it? Because, I mean, I've experienced this before in previous businesses. We've done the job. We're so happy that we've been given some work. Like, wow, they've chosen us. We've gone and done the job. And then I remember me and my mate who I worked with at the time thinking, do we ring them yet? Or what if we piss them off? Like all of this worry and anxiety, and it become a problem because it became a monster, and we was owed so much money at one point. And so what are the if we speak, the people that sort of watch this channel, I believe, the small business owners in the UK, ranging from like a one-man, one-woman band, probably to a turnover of about 5 million. What are the sort of most effective strategies and principles that you can give to these people that are evergreen, so to speak?
I suppose the best piece of advice or strategy is communication. And communication really is key. Opening up that dialogue with your customer, you will find out if they're in financial distress. Leaving it does damage your professional credibility. At the end of the day, it's you and your client. You are working in a partnership, and it is all about working together as a team to make sure that payment comes in. Don't ever be afraid to ask for payment. because at the end of the day, you have provided a service.
Mhm.
Um, I would also suggest that you do, if you're able to, regular statement runs. And
Mhm.
statements are particularly important. They are classed as a legal reminder, but they're particularly important because many businesses, they don't pay unless they receive a statement.
Mhm.
Not only that, but it allows them to identify if they have any missed invoices, if there's been any misallocations, and it really minimizes the window for them to dispute anything further down the line should they decide not to pay anything.
Mhm.
But again, it's a form of communication, sending an invoice, sending a quick email, picking up the phone. You can
So if we
negotiate
go,
payment plans.
uh, if we go a step back, and this is something that I've sort of figured out more since becoming involved in the insolvency industry, is there are softwares and technologies that people can use to decide, actually, do I even want to work with this company? Have you any experience with working with any of the sort of the credit softwares out there and how people can use them?
Yeah, so there's loads of different credit softwares out there. There's I myself I use Credit Safe, and
Hmm.
that's a brilliant tool. And I really would highly recommend that any business owner does do a credit check on anybody that they're planning on going into business with. And it does, again, it highlights the risk and it minimizes risk for you, but it helps manage your expectation. Is this particular client a late payer? And it highlights all of that for you. I mean, speaking of software, you'd ask me if there's any tips and hints that I can give. There is so much AI out available now for for companies to be able to help with the chasing of payment.
Hmm.
Um, they can automatically send out reminders, automatically send out statements, even down to you can pre-populate emails and they will, at a hit of a button, they can send all of those out as well. I mean, your accounting software, Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, and all the rest of them, there's a lot of functionality in there that isn't being used to its full potential as well. And again, communication, that boils down to picking up the phone to Xero or Sage, and they will help you. If
Hmm.
you say, look, I'd like to have a function where I can automatically allocate cash. I know for a fact that Xero has that functionality in place where you can set up a rule and it will automatically allocate cash and it will decrease man hours and allow you then to actually be able to perform the duties that you're there for, managing your company, providing the service, while in the background you've got AI sorting out some of the chasing for you.
Hmm. And
There's lots out there that you can utilize that you've probably already got that you don't know that you don't realize that the functionality is actually there.
I think what surprised me over the years is you sort of expect the jobbing plumber to be that one man band, and he goes out there and he does the quotes, the collecting, the installing. But it surprises me how many businesses that are a lot bigger than one and two man band. But you've got this guy who owns the business or girl, and not all, and they are like they're in everything, and they're actually making a mess of everything. So how important? At what point would you say to somebody, credit control needs to be delegated either to a member of staff or somebody like yourself? Is there like a tipping point where it becomes a bad idea for that guy to even be getting involved in it?
First of all, if you're not comfortable having those conversations, it needs
Hmm.
to be delegated. Um, One of the benefits of having credit control, whether it be internal, external, you call yourself something different, is as the one man band or the salesperson or the director, they're having a very different conversation with a client. Whereas credit control or the person that is dedicated to that part of the business, they're having a conversation with a debtor. Now, the two are the same, but you have very, very different conversations, and your client will actually open up more about the financial side to a credit controller 9 times out of 10 than they would to the director of a company, whether it be a one-man band or because you have a different relationship. Now, if credit control is massively important in any business, whether you're a one-man band or a corporate company. And it starts at the very, very start. It's not just when invoices become overdue. It starts as soon as you think you're going to open up a company, credit control should start kicking in. From down to your terms and conditions, policies and procedures, systems, risk exposure, licensing, it all comes under the credit control umbrella. Now, if you asked at what point would you start delegating, if as soon as you can.
Okay.
If you're a one-man band and you're very comfortable having that conversation and it's easily managed and everything is ticking over quite nicely, your clients pay on time, you wouldn't need credit control because you're doing the job of credit control. You're wearing that hat. If you're a one-man band and you don't like having those conversations, you would probably need somebody to help you and assist you with that, or use the AI software available.
Well, with regards to, you sort of hit on a few points a couple of times, terms and conditions, systems, policies and procedures. In an ideal world, could you share a little bit more about where people needed to be aiming? So let's start with terms and conditions. If you was going into a business, what would you be saying to them to get in order?
Is it a new business or a pre-existing?
I would suspect people watching this channel are pre-existing. They're already up and running. They may have started to hit some bumps in the road, which is where they found me.
First of all, make sure you've got a contract, some form of service agreement. You would not believe the amount of companies and one-man bands that I speak to who don't have a contract. They have nothing in writing, and it's a very, very risky game to play, particularly if you're taking payments via direct debit. You don't have a direct debit mandate and you don't have a contract. Very, very risky business. So that would be the first point of call. Make sure you've got some kind of agreement, service level, contract, email outlining your expectations and what the client can expect from you. The payment terms, very crucial. If you're offering credit to a client, you need to have it somewhere where it states, again, what your expectations are of your client. Your terms and conditions, if there's a cooling off period, if any additional interest is going to be added, if there's so many things, and I do keep saying it, but it's all about risk exposure and managing that risk and expectation. And you may have a 9-page document that's full of terms and conditions, and as long as it's accessible somewhere and your client knows where it's accessible, you don't need to give them 9 pages. That would be the first point of call. That's always my first point of call, is let me see your terms and conditions.
And if somebody's sort of not got these terms and conditions, or they've been going out there on the fly right now, it's a fairly easy thing to start with, isn't it? It's like, okay, well, from today, they might be watching this podcast and go, you know what, that's a good idea. Where would they? I know that they could speak to somebody like you to assist them with that, but I try and give as much free advice out there as possible, and they end up ringing me anyway, you know. So where could we help them, Karina? Where can they get terms and conditions? Is there stuff on the internet they can find, or where would you point them to?
You can go to a solicitor and pay up to tens of thousands, or you can become a member of the FSB.
I've got the FSB doing one of these in a week or so. Yeah, the fabulous. You
It is a
will love the fact that you're shouting them
fantastic
out.
organisation. Yeah, it is a fantastic organisation. They support all businesses from one-man bands up
We're
to.
members.
I'm a member of FSB. You've got masses of documentation in there. You've got all your contracts, you've got even down to hairdressing chair rentals.
Mhm.
It's and they've all been drafted by a solicitor, and you will save yourself an absolute fortune and it is a very small annual fee that you pay to become a member, and you have got access to so much. And there are I'm starting to sell FSB now, I know, but there are even networking
Well,
events and
I've
support
got
and
Chris Davis coming on to this. We went to it
yeah,
last week when I had the lurgy, yeah, and he's part of the FSB. So I'm an advocate of it. Yeah, it's
yeah,
and you
it's
just
brilliant.
don't realise what it is you can get from them. But we'll give them the podcast next week, right? We'll get
Yeah,
back
I'll
to
leave
you.
that there. But
But that's it, isn't it? Join something like the FSB. You know,
yeah, and
there's
all of your
all
documents are there.
fabulous. Next point you talked about was systems, right? You know, and I personally have read books like the E-Myth that talk about how to systemize your business. It sounds great. Then I get in my business and I'm like, because we're a relatively small business. There's me, my brother, Emily. Our other side has a few more moving parts, but a lot of it is done like, we just do it. We don't really think about it. And I know that's not, when we bring someone new into the business, we find ourselves spending so much time listening and we sort of show them as opposed to giving them a working document. So give me some tips on what systems. I'm a newcomer here. What should we be doing?
So again, it depends on the size of the business, but there are a lot of credit control systems available that
Mm-hmm.
again can it uses a lot of AI, and like I've said, it reduces man hours. They There's a couple in particular where hypothetically, if you were to hire a new credit controller and you didn't want to sit down and go through everything, it you upload the debtors into your software. It talks directly to your accounting package. So if you're using Zero, if anything's paid on Zero, it will automatically go through into your credit control software and show as paid. All the
Okay.
notes are automatically stored there. It will even tell the credit controller when to call somebody. It comes up with like a task list. So again, it saves you a lot of training because someone can just go in, they read the notes, and it'll say, you need to phone 30 people today. Here's the 30. This is what stage they're at. Due in 5 days, overdue by three. If there's a reminder letter, these are the reminder letters you need to send out. And there is so much out there now. And yeah, one in particular that is very good is in Vivo. That's a very good system. I'm a big advocate in Vivo, I must admit.
Does it integrate
Um,
with things like HubSpot and Salesforce and, like, because people will have their own CRMs that they try and run everything off? Do you know what? I'm going to have a
I'm
look.
not sure.
How do you spell in Vivo?
INVEVO.
Vivo, HubSpot. Right, yeah. So the reason that I was asking is my head when you think of credit control, I remember in businesses I've worked in the past, and you would have a big department that did credit control. Some people will need that, but a lot of people who's watching this, it sounds like there's boil in the bag solutions where they can get this software. They can what what um what interested me about talking to you, Karina, I didn't know this was out there. Just explain to us a little bit about what you actually do for clients, because there's a number of different strings to your bow. But if there's a small business owner out there struggling with credit control, doesn't like having the conversations, he's got debts that are building up, or she's got, what could you actually do in and go in and help them with?
So there's three things that we could do. So to start off with, we are outsourced credit control. So we're a third party credit control company, which means that you can essentially hire us for a certain length of time, and we will contact your debtors as part of your company. It's called a white label service.
Mhm.
So we're your credit control department in a different office, so to speak. And so we can either do credit control as a support service, where you would pay a flat monthly fee, and is usually a lot cheaper than hiring a member of staff to sit in the office. There is a what we call a ledger collect out. So if you've got a large amount of invoices that have become overdue, you haven't got the facility to hire somebody, you can outsource what's called a ledger collect out, and it's a no collect, no fee. Now, there are plenty of companies out there that do this. At KS Credit Control, the commission is relatively low because we have a very good success rate, and it goes between 5 and 10%. And again, a lot of companies do like this option because there's no risk to them. If we don't collect, we don't get paid. And again, that is done as a white label service. So we would call up, if we've been hired by ABC Limited, we call up and say, hello, it's Karina from the credit control department to ABC Limited. It's still, and you keep that nice client relationship balance because you've not, in the client's view, you've not then outsourced and given it to a third party. We offer debt recovery, where we would go in as KS Credit Control Limited. And it's a slightly different approach because it's more, well, we're coming in as a completely different company to try and recover the debt. We also offer credit consultancy, so we can go in, we can look at your business from start to finish and see how we can improve and how we can make the credit control more effective and to work specifically and for your business.
Brilliant.
And we also offer training for existing staff as well.
You know, like, what are some of the options that a director has, okay, or a business owner have if someone's not playing ball? You know, like, we're trying the debt collection route. What are the things that, you know, when we're talking about stat demands, CCJs, winding up petitions,
Yeah.
do you ever use those methods regularly?
We tend not to go down the winding up route because if you're winding up a company, you're not going to get your money because you're winding the company up. And I think that that's quite a common misconception. They automatically think we're going to go in with a winding up petition. Yeah, we'll share them. And actually, in some instances, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face because you're not going to get paid.
More often than not.
Yeah, more often than not, you're not going to get paid because you're winding the company up. CCJs can be quite effective. Again, if other companies have run credit checks on this particular debtor and you've served them with a CCJ, everybody that has run this credit check on the debtor will be notified that a CCJ has been served. Now, yes, you can pay and have it removed from your records. Everybody's already been notified that you've been served with a CCJ, and then all of a sudden your creditors are on their back, and everybody's fighting for money. So if you've got a particularly tricky client or debtor, as we know them as, and the typical route of, excuse me, calling them, sending emails hasn't worked, you need to, so I should just probably say consumer business work very differently. So if it's a consumer client, it works slightly different, and so they need to be, we'll park that one. We're just talking business to business.
We'll talk business to business, yeah, because that's who the people generally are that's watching this.
Yeah, so you would send out your reminder letters, a letter before notice or a letter before action, and that would then give them a certain length of time to pay. Now, you can also charge 8% above the base bank rate of England. If you have within your terms and conditions, and only if you have within your terms and conditions, can you then also add on other interest. So if you've said late payment, you'll have 4%, you'll have an additional admin fee, you can also add that on. And there is compensation as part of the statutory what you can add on. And that goes up to, I believe, £100 that you can include. Um, and again, there are a lot of templates on the FSB website that will give you that letter before action, and it's very effective. The FSB will also, there's a section in there that will calculate the late payment interest. So that would be the route that I would go down. But I always tend to refer back to the terms and conditions as well.
Okay, and I think it's just a lot of the business owners out here, they just don't know what they don't know.
No.
I mean, what type of are the big mistakes that directors make when it comes to credit control? You know, the things, please, you know, what are the big boo-boos that people tend to make?
Oh gosh, there's a list. The biggest one is no contract. That is the biggie. And I know you sat there thinking, how often does that happen? It happens a lot. That's the
I
biggest
can
one.
well
No
imagine, yeah, I can
contract.
well imagine.
Um, accepting the, I'll pay you next time. I'll pay you next week. The
Yeah,
repeat offenders. Um, being, what's the right word? Reluctant. Being very reluctant to chase. Not wanting
yeah.
to pick up that phone because they're worried about upsetting the debtor or the client.
Hmm.
Um, not using AI that's already built into their systems.
Yeah.
Not getting on top of it and not having that communication. I think that's what it boils down to. And burying your head and letting it continue. And rather than they'll look at the turnover figure and they'll think, we're doing fantastic. But actually business hasn't made
Yes.
profit.
Yeah.
They'll look at the sales figure and think, oh yes. But none of
Yeah.
that money's come in. And until the sale's been paid, it's not a sale, it's a
Mm.
debt. They'll think, oh, yes, but we've got 1,000 clients, but none of them are paid. So they're not actually a client, they're a debtor because they owe you money. And
There's a
one of
bucket with a load
one
of
of the
holes in
biggest,
it that behind them.
yeah, and one of the big mistakes that I do hear all too often is, well, they're a big company, so I wouldn't worry too much about them not paying because they're a big company.
Hmm.
It's not how it works. It just means they fall harder and that they've got the resources to actually be able to disguise the fact that they've got an issue for longer than a smaller business has.
Yeah.
It's having that almost false sense of security that because they're bigger, they're guaranteed getting to get paid. I mean, we've seen big companies fold very quickly.
Mm. And the knock on, listen, let us dive into a bit of specifics here. So, what are the things, and like I say, this is something I've struggled with in the past. Um, how do you sort of, first of all, walk us through what's the ideal process for handling a difficult customer who consistently pays late? You know, what would you be doing?
First thing that I would be doing is ascertaining if it's a can't pay or won't pay.
Okay.
That's the first thing you need to establish.
Hmm.
Obviously, don't pick up the phone and say, "Can you pay?" Or are you just not? Can you not pay? You're just not paying. But that is the very first thing, and every highly skilled credit controller will be able to spot that a mile off by
Hmm.
having one conversation. They will be able to detect red flags if you which category you fall into. So let's say it's a can't pay. They're falling behind every month because they can't pay. First thing to do is, as a credit controller, we're not here to bully your clients into paying. That's not what credit controllers do. And I think that we are perceived as soon as you say credit controller, debt management for business, it's like,
Mm.
that's not what we're here for. We are here to make sure that your client pays you, but stays afloat whilst doing it. Because if they go bust, you don't get paid. You lose a
And you lose a
client.
client, yeah.
You lose your client. So if they can't pay, you need to look at negotiating a payment plan that again works for both parties. So there's no point me saying you need to pay £100 a week and they agree to it, but they actually can't afford it, fall behind in their responsibilities for paying, interest is accrued, they fold, go into liquidation because they can't afford to pay everybody else. The whole system breaks down. If it's a won't pay, that works different, because that is when you go in a little bit more tactful with your reminders, your interest. You become a little bit more creative. I certainly would not continue services. I would not recommend continuing services if it's a won't pay and have no want to pay their bill.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly offer payment plan if that suits you both. If it's, I mean, we're talking about if the service has been amazing or the product has been amazing and there's been no dispute. So that would be, I would stay on it. I would have weekly or twice a week conversations with that debtor. If they've made a promise to pay the day before, call them.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure it's still on schedule. Call them on the day. Has the payment been made? Can you confirm the amount that's been paid? What method? Has it been paid by backs, which takes slightly longer than a direct transfer?
Mm-hmm.
Is it paid by check? Again, I would not recommend a check payment because it can be lost in the post. It's a very easy one to say, oh, I sent the check, did you not get it? I'll send another one.
Mm.
And it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. But seek help when you need it. Don't be afraid to seek help. If it is that you want to go down the debt collection route, if you want to go and get a statutory demand from a solicitor, and it's not as expensive as you think until you get to court, then that's when the expenses start coming. And a lot of those expenses you can then charge back to the debtor. But have the conversation.
Brilliant.
Don't just bury your head in the sand and think they'll pay eventually.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, we both know where that ends up. You've been really good to have on the podcast. So I'm going to wrap up a little bit now, but where can people find out more about you and more about what you do as well? Because hopefully you'll get a few inquiries on the back of this as well.
You can find us on our website at
Mm-hmm.
kscreditcontrol.co.uk. You
Mm-hmm.
can find us on LinkedIn, KS Credit Control, and on Facebook.
KS Credit Control.
And if you want to email directly, then there's info@kscreditcontrol.co.uk.
And if anyone's speaking to me and they feel that they need Karina's details, I can share them with you on a conversation as well. So, Karina, I'd like to thank you for joining the podcast. You've been brilliant, really interesting. I've certainly learned a thing or two. Directors out there, if you want to get in touch with me, Director First, or Karina at KS Credit Control, just shout out. Thank you for watching us. And Karina, once again, God bless. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.